Hi, my name is Delaney Corlesquet. I'm a member of the DevPortal Awards organization team, and I'm here to continue our interview of the jury for the 2021 DevPortal Awards. As a recap, we had 11 jury members who judged 49 developer portal nominations over 15 categories. The judges were split into 3 working groups with the responsibility of selecting winners for 5 categories each. All of the judges were involved in the selection of the final overall winners. During our first gala, I interviewed Michael Meng, Katalin Naduj, Sophie Routard, Bob Watson, Lucas Rosenstock, Ellis Pratt, and Tom Johnson. So our third group of jurors today had the fun challenge of tackling how to find APIs, business models, monetization, and API gateways and alternatives to REST APIs. I'd like to introduce you to our third jury group. We have Flavio Heraldes, who's an experienced API product manager at Lufthansa. I'd like to ask you, Flavio, which nominee stood out for you?
Well, that is a good and challenging question. I mean, there were many good examples, but I would say the one that would come immediately to my mind would be Ably. I mean, they really have some good stuff there. When you go into the portal, you know immediately what they offer and how to use it, both from a publisher and the subscriber point of view. They immediately have examples on how to use the service that they provide. But it doesn't really just stay there. They have amazing documentation, very extensive and easy to follow, from guides and tutorials to very detailed technical information. And also on top of that, usually the onboarding processes, they tend to be a bit complex, but they really simplified a lot. When you register, immediately you get a default key that you can start using in just a few seconds. So the entire flow is really very simple and very straightforward. So from an overall perspective, that's really looks very good for me. It really stood out.
That's cool. We need to all check out fully. I'd like to introduce a second juror on this interview today, Emmeline Wang. Emmeline Wang is a global business development leader for AWS Marketplace. Emmeline, which category gave you the most challenge and why?
Delaney, thanks for having us here. So out of the 4 categories that this jury panel evaluated together, the one that was very interesting and challenging was all about integration with the API gateway or gateways. And part of it was we started off the evaluation by understanding what each of us could experience from a hands-on perspective. So for example, being able to log in and access the API, but then we were able to, thanks to the ISVs and the nominees who participated, get to see a little bit behind the scenes. Luckily, the nominees trusted us to be able to handle some, very sensitive information, but just so that we could truly understand the parts of the integration that you couldn't experience with just the developer portal. And so we're really grateful to be able to have that, to be able to be as objective in the evaluation as much as possible. And we focused on the developer as the initial audience from a jury perspective.
The additional material provided by the nominees, was that very helpful? Like, I know that there were some questionnaires and there were some videos. Was that used as well?
Yes, it was very helpful. And, we basically we were very fair, right? We gave everyone the same questions and allowed them to provide what they thought was the most relevant.
Okay, thank you. We have Katrien van Hazum, who is recently put in charge of the digital identity for KBC. She is a digital enthusiast keen on strategic transformation and challenging environments. Katrien, which nominee stood out for you?
Hi, Delaney. Which nominee stood out for me? Actually, I would have to say the BT portal stood out for me and repeatedly charmed me because they operate in a very complex environment. They have a lot of different types of customers, retail, wholesale, and they still managed to give a consistent flow. They really focused on good user-centered development, good expectation management. So they have a lot of information there, but it's graspable because they have to cater to a lot of people. But still, it was very good job that they did there.
Cool. So we have to keep an eye out for BT and Ably both. So I'd like to introduce Liz Couteau now. Liz Couteau was recently a Senior Product Marketing Manager for Shopify's developer program and is currently a Senior Product Marketing Manager at Unity Technologies. Liz, I'm going to choose a question for you. Which category gave you the most challenge and why?
Ooh, for me, it was definitely the best gateway integration. So much complexity, so much nuance. For us, we've really had to dig deep. So it was a lot to consider, lots of unique challenges for each portal. So that one was the hardest one to weigh in on.
So the first category that we're going to be talking about is the best findability of products. There were 22 nominations. Given the multitude of nominations, how did you sort this list to find the final finalists?
Well, we indeed had a lot of candidates in this category, and some really did raise the bar. And even though few portals had only one API, they made sure that it was easy to find the in and out for that one. However, as we said, because it's on findability of products, we decided as a jury to focus on portals with more than one API. And then we looked really into what is a good entity search. Are there filtering options? Is there relevant categorization? And is there an easy entry point? A tool service catalog. And yeah, of course, it's always very nice if something is visually appealing as well. If the visuals guide you through as well. Especially for me, I'm a visual thinker. There are a few portals that charmed all jury members. For example, Algolia was really focused on the audience, and also in their nurture campaign, they're not too salesy. So once you find what you're looking for, really the experience there was really good as well.
Thank you. So let's move on to the next category, unless anyone has anything else to add for the findability of products.
I feel like Katrine did a great job of covering every aspect that the jury looked at. That was awesome, Katrine.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So let's move on to the best developer portal for alternatives to REST APIs. For this category, there were 3 nominees. This was a challenging decision. What are the things that stood out to you, jurors?
This category really makes sense, right? I mean, nowadays, when we talk about APIs and API management, everyone kind of assumes that we're talking about REST APIs, right? But that's not always necessarily the case. And I mean, as this assumption exists, there is this tendency of making assumptions that people know how to use the services, how to use the products. But sometimes that's not that's not the case, and the portals need not only to explain technically how to use the service, how to use the products that are available, but also the business behind it, right? So what are the capabilities that are available and how to use, and what's the business concepts that the developers can take advantage of. And we really saw that in most of the participants. On one hand, very clear documentation explaining the technology and how to use it step by step. But on the other hand, also alternatives that were being picked exactly because of this ease of use and to make the life of the consumers easier. And environments where REST is not that known, it's really interesting that we saw alternatives like widgets or pre-made UI components that take these integration steps really to the next level, and the usability to this next level that I mentioned.
Because you judged other dev portals as well, were there any other developer portals that maybe didn't put themselves in this category, but that also had something notable?
Yes, for sure. I mean, the simple existence of documentation is not enough, right? Not anymore. Again, even if people know how APIs work, and there's this assumption. But I would say one thing that we consistently saw in almost every portal was the existence of SDKs, or at least a few samples in multiple programming languages. So this already provides a bit of a level of abstraction on top of the pure technical interfaces. But answering to your question directly, one example that comes to my mind would be Algolia. because they provide the REST APIs, the traditional that we can see everywhere, but also libraries, right? So the SDKs that I mentioned. But then they also take it much further. They provide UI design API interfaces, sorry. So libraries that people can just drop in their UIs so that they can much easier just use the products and the services, but also libraries and frameworks for other development frameworks like Rails or Django, and also components for platforms that are around in the market like WordPress or Shopify. So they look at the customers from a global perspective and provide options for everyone. Another example that could be mentioned is Ably, because they provide not only the REST APIs and SDKs, but also server-sent events, right, by asynchronous APIs, by using, for example, MQTT. And not only they offer a significant range of options, but their documentation is also very good and offering not only the low-level data field descriptions, but the overviews, guides, tutorials, so the overall concepts and patterns of how to use the services that they provide.
It feels like the options are truly limitless.
Yes, the sky is the limit, and creativity and imagination is endless.
Do you have any prediction for what would be the flavor for 2022? Like what would be something that might stand out next year?
I would say asynchronous services seem to gain more relevance everywhere. Also, if we think, for example, about mobile devices, right? Because, I mean, in the phones, you have these notifications that you get every now and then, but also with IoT and such kind of things, I would say probably we are going that direction. So again, REST is more synchronous, and obviously it will remain there, but I would say asynchronous is gaining more and more importance.
Wow, very informative. Thank you. All right, so next category that we're going to talk about is the best API business model. For this, there were 13 nominations. Can you discuss how the open and closed nature of the data affected the jurors' ranking of these nominations?
So I think it's less about whether or not the data is open and more about what the end consumer is going to use the data for. And the main reason I mentioned that is the developer portal, even though it's developers actually doing the integrations and the work, there's quite a bit of upstream and downstream work to help with, for example, things like pricing models, right? Whether or not it's pay-as-you-go versus, whether or not it's based on each app that you might publish. And so to me, this was a fantastic business model because of the diversity of our panel. For example, Bowl.com, right, which is a very prevalent e-commerce company in EMEA, has a major presence. And per se, they had what was perceived as one API. However, what was really interesting was just seeing the capability of their, pricing model to be able to do things that you need to from an e-commerce perspective. And so I just, wanted to kind of mention some of the ideas there, right? So it's easy to automate adding products, managing fulfillment and the e-commerce lifecycle. And they didn't just talk about the technical aspects, they put in key concepts, and they just really helped people to be able to get involved in that ecosystem. And so I wanted to mention that. And then in general, just making information easy to digest as you move about the dev portal. For example, having a very clear frame of reference as to where you are, where you want to go, to help any business personas that are there trying to understand the model. The other thing that I thought was very interesting is, I think it was BR API Developer Portal. I think if I got that correctly, it's basically the one where it's kind of like your cable TV and the packages available. And so it was just really interesting to see the different kinds of promotions that they were running that could appeal to both developers and business personas who are maybe using that.
Would anyone like to add anything?
Yeah, I was gonna add one more thing. A lot of the times it's strategic, right? So maybe it's not direct monetization. And I think that's where, meaning it's very sticky to be able to integrate with an API, right? You've got time, resources, and you have to justify using precious resources, right, that are not working on the actual product to be able to integrate with an API. And so whether or not it was the scale of direct monetization to where it's more strategic monetization, I think that's one sort of challenge that these, dev portals have to overcome in kind of converting people to, for example, using the paid version of their API.
That was one of the reasons why we introduced this Best Monetization Award as well, because just to have that differentiation, because there is a clear distinction between developer portals doing indirect and direct revenue sources. Yeah. The next category we're going to discuss, actually, why don't we just jump right into best use monetization, because it's related. What would you say are the challenges you faced as a juror trying to evaluate portals for monetization? Was there a moment where you had to reset your thinking or assumptions because of the way that nominees presented themselves?
Well, I think Emmeline already mentioned a little bit something around there. I would say the biggest challenge we had was defining the borders and the criteria for doing the evaluation and making sure that we were not stepping into the realm of the API business model, right? So how do we differentiate these two categories? And also having a diverse jury. I mean, we have different background, different points of view. So we kind of approach this category in different ways. So I think the reset that we had and was defining these borders and defining the scope that we're trying to evaluate and rethinking what we are looking for. Once we managed to do that and create the right frame and scope for the category around pricing, visibility, and clarity, it became fairly straightforward. Of course, it's probably also helped the fact that the number of contestants is not that big in this category. So if we had more, probably it would have been much more challenging with the different options and alternatives that we could have available.
Yeah, we were able to dive deep, like Flavio said. For example, BT is actually the one, where you had to log in to be able to see all the different pricing options. But for example, G&D Convego Connect APIs, at first it was difficult because we couldn't see any pricing, right? So what was available either publicly or after you log in. But that one was specifically interesting because, for example, we would try to dig deeper, right? We would interact with the platform to see what other information we could find. And then in general, for me anyway, as a business development person, just summarizing what it would take to align to be able to, say I was a company that wanted to use the Connect APIs that G&D Convego had, what information was available to me to help create that environment where it would make sense for the two organizations to interact.
I'm hoping next year we have more than 3 nominations, but it's a lot of work to look into this and to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, let's hope so. I mean, it's a big, it's big world, big business, right? I mean, and definitely companies and industries are going that direction. So I really hope that in the next few years we're going to have more.
Yes, and then there was definitely quite a bit of data about how a lot of companies are moving towards more of a pay-as-you-go model if it's kind of a SaaS-based, software model where it's powered by APIs. And so most companies, I think today, if they're not adopting that, they're looking to see if that's even a viable option. And so one thing I want to say that I like about DevPortal Awards is since 2018 till now, I'm grateful that you've been not only, listening to what the jury has given as feedback. So for example, Findability had so many nominees that we actually made recommendations for future judging panels to think about the maturity of the API. And in that way, maybe segment the different contestants and to be able to celebrate where they are on the journey, right? To where we don't ever want to penalize someone for having one API versus many APIs. We want to be able to encourage every dev portal creator and maintainer because we know it takes a lot of work.
And now we're going to talk about the best use of API gateway integration. For this category, we had 14 nominations. I think this made the jury wonder what is under the hood here, because an API consumer often doesn't see what the API gateway is. What were the criteria that you ultimately used to judge this category, and what information could we have gathered from nominees to make this process easier?
Yeah, goodness. Well, it's a tough one because it doesn't always apply to all API types. Yeah, so some businesses can simply provide a plug and play API solution. This we know is a lot more complexity. Things really have to be architected really well, securely, resiliently. They also have to simplify this complexity for their end user. So I think when we're looking at this, we kind of kept these things in mind, looking at really great solutions that kind of demonstrated they took in mind the complexity, security, those additional needs, but also did a really good job of explaining that and then building end user trust through that great portal experience.
Okay, does anyone else want to add to the answer? Add to Liz's answer?
Sure. We talked initially about potential criteria such as, is there a sandbox environment? What was the experience from test to production? How seamless was the experience? And as Katrina, Flavio, and Liz mentioned, the more seamless it is, the more the dev portal, organizers and creators and maintainers had to work to obfuscate that complexity. We looked at the onboarding journey with tools such as friction logging, steps to publishing your API. How easy was it, for example, to get a test key or even a real key and to create? We like the fact that some of them already populated different sample apps. And then can we really access the actual integration, which we couldn't? And so the second part of your question was, right, we put together some objective questions to get more information about what's under the hood.
Thank you. And is there anything else that any of you would like to add?
I would just have a small note. I mean, and thank you guys for organizing this and for having as jury, because I think we were really honored, and it's really special what we have been able to see, especially in this category, because as Catherine said, if you go as a user to a developer portal, if the work was done well, then it's completely seamless for you. You just click a few buttons and everything is working perfectly. Yeah. But what we have seen behind the scenes, in some cases, it's a complexity that we really don't imagine between different departments, different companies, different everything. Yeah. So it was really amazing to see what people are doing. There's things that are beyond our imagination out there.
That's great. Now I open up the floor for any other comments or any other commentary that you would like to add. Anything for next year's DevPortal Awards or for our audience to benefit from?
So I absolutely love all of the write-ups for each of the categories. And, I hope that, because this jury did a great job of capturing our notes, what delighted us, what was surprising, in a good way. And we hope that maybe in the future, there's quite a bit of self-service for folks who are kind of self-nominating, or for others who nominate the work of others who are too humble to nominate themselves, that, there's some kind of just because, you've done such a great job of DevPortal Awards, that it's grown to a place where it really inspires people as they're maybe starting to even, gather what they need to launch a dev portal, all the way to, companies like Mercedes-Benz, right, who's been a part of DevPortal Awards for many years, to continue innovating. And so I just wanted to mention, thank you so much for being open to all of our feedback. We hope that future panels will get to experience what we have, to continue to contribute and learn together, because it's not easy, right, to maintain these portals as all of us have experienced.
Yeah, maybe I can add on that. Even it's indeed, as you say, I mean, it's not easy to make those portals, but I think also if you look at the nominations, if you look at the information that was provided, I think a lot of the nominees put a lot of effort also in the nomination itself. I think we really had the obligation towards all the nominees really to go through that thoroughly, and to put also that effort in there, because it's as Laura once mentioned, it's really about a celebration of what everybody is doing, and I really like that, and it's true. So it's from at a certain moment we were like, can we now maybe say that we have a tie, and there was no way to choose, and sometimes it was really difficult.
Yeah.
But I think that's a lot of kudos really to everyone who put effort in nominating themselves or others, as you mentioned as well.
Yeah, and I wanted to add to something Flavio mentioned earlier about SDKs and libraries. One thing that I saw across portals is companies, even Barclays, et cetera, using things like Postman collections. Someone else was using README and other tools to help quickly expose both, documentation, being able to try out the APIs in a way so that, because, typically maybe a team that manages a dev portal, could be very small, or that's not their full-time job to maintain the dev portal. And so having ways to quickly expose things, because as they're responding to our questions as a panel, right? Think about the fact that they're also serving the audience that's consuming and using the dev portal, which is a lot of work. And so I was very impressed, and I think it's going to be a trend going forward to see more companies use tools to help them more quickly reach, their audience's questions.
It's very, very insightful. Thank you. There is something also strategic in nominees nominating themselves for specific categories, I think, because from behind the scenes, I saw that there was a pattern. There are some returning nominees who kind of know where their strengths are, and then other new nominees who maybe didn't realize that they could have probably won in a different category had they nominated themselves for it. So I'm hoping that this interview and the previous interview that we had will contribute towards the knowledge for next year, so that developer portal teams can nominate themselves with a little bit of knowledge and a little bit of hope that they're going to come up in the final few. Flavio, any last words?
Yeah, just a small thing. I mean, not a recommendation or anything, but just a curiosity. I was really surprised about the number of industries that are participating, right? So we're not talking only about technology companies anymore. I mean, we go from, I don't know, banks and fintechs and automotive, right? I mean, Emily mentioned Mercedes, logistics. I mean, it's amazing how this trend, let's say, it's spreading across multiple industries. And I'm really curious to see the new industries that are going to also adopt it and will appear in the next few years.
So thank you again. Thank you, Emmeline, Katrien, Flavio, and Liz, for taking the time for both being on the jury and for meeting with me today. Thank you as well to our jurors from the last interview, Tom, Ellis, Lucas, Bob, Michael, Katalin, and Sophie. Now, I return your attention to what we have all been anticipating. Back to you, Laura, and the announcement of the final DevPortal Award 2021 winners.